The morning that would change everything began like any other inside Ironwood State Penitentiary. But beneath the surface, beneath the routine rhythm of footsteps and metal doors, there was a heaviness, an unspoken tension that felt almost alive. It was the morning of Daniel Hale's execution. Not a single guard said it out loud, yet everyone felt it. On that chilled dawn of March the 7th, 2012, the prison seemed to breathe differently. The fluorescent lights hummed lower, keys clinked slower. Conversations softened into whispers that died before reaching open air. At the far end of death row, in cell 41, Daniel sat quietly on the edge of his cot. His hands, once calloused from years of carpentry, rested loosely between his knees. His eyes, no longer blazing with the stubborn pride that had walked into this place 7 years earlier, stared blankly at the concrete floor. He looked like a man who had already lived his last life, and yet was still waiting for permission to leave. No one expected his final request to matter. They were wrong. When the warden entered his cell block, clipboard in hand, even the guards glanced up. Final requests were usually predictable. A specific meal, a final phone call, a visit from family. But Daniel had no one left to call, no one who wrote him, no one who visited. In the long years since his trial, the world beyond these walls had moved on without him. The warden cleared his throat. "Daniel," he said, "this is the moment. If you have any final requests, state them now." Daniel lifted his eyes slowly, as though the effort itself carried weight. When he spoke, his voice didn't tremble. It didn't plead. It simply existed, quiet, steady, and unbearably sincere. "I want to see Max," he said. "My dog." The guards exchanged confused glances. A dog? Of all the things a condemned man could ask for, this one felt strange, unexpected, vulnerable. The warden blinked. "You want your dog?" Daniel nodded once. "Max is all I had," he murmured. "He was there before everything went wrong, before the arrest, before the trial, before the world decided who I was." The room fell still. Max had been taken into custody the night Daniel was arrested for the murder of a local shopkeeper, a charge Daniel never stopped denying. The dog had been placed in a foster program connected to the county shelter. For the first time in years, Daniel's voice carried emotion, a quiet ache that filled the room. "I just want to see him," he whispered. "One last time." The warden, after a long silence, finally nodded. A decision that would unravel everything. The request detonated through the prison like a whispered explosion. In the control room, officers discussed it with a mixture of disbelief and discomfort. "We can't bring a dog into the yard," one guard protested, "especially not on execution day. It's a security risk. No protocol exists for this." But then the oldest guard in the room spoke up, a man named Officer Ramirez. Calm, level-headed, known for doing his job with humanity. "Daniel has nothing," Ramirez said quietly. "No family, no friends. This is the only creature that ever loved him." A rare hush followed. "Let him have this," Ramirez continued. 10 minutes, supervised, in the yard. The warden pulled Daniel's file from a locked drawer. Perfect behavior. 0 violence. 0 incidents. A detailed note on the dog registered in his name, a German shepherd he had raised since the pup was 8 weeks old. "Okay," the warden said finally. 10 minutes. In the yard. Under full supervision. And so, the stage was set. For a moment, no one expected. For a truth no one imagined. The yard that morning felt frozen in place. The sky hung low and pale, clouded in a soft gray that made the concrete appear almost blue. A single metal chair stood in the center of the yard, placed there for Daniel. He stood a few feet away from it, wrists cuffed in front, guarded on all sides. Then the far gate creaked open. Daniel's breath hitched. Padding into the yard, flanked by 2 officers, was Max. Older now. A little grayer around the muzzle. Slight stiffness in his hind legs. But his coat, black and tan, still gleamed with life. And his eyes, those bright amber eyes, widened the moment they found Daniel. His ears perked. His tail twitched. then wagged harder. Max began pulling, dragging the leash taut. "Let him go," the warden instructed gently. And with a small nod, they unclipped the leash. Max bolted. Daniel dropped to his knees just in time for the full weight of an 80-pound dog to crash into him. Max whimpered softly, sounds full of joy, relief, and years of longing poured into one trembling moment. Daniel pressed his face into the thick fur. Max licked his jaw. Daniel's hands shook as he gripped the dog's neck. The world dissolved. There was no execution, no countdown, no guard, no regret. Just a man and his dog reunited after years of absence. But then everything changed. It happened suddenly. Max's body stiffened. The wagging stopped. His ears shot forward. A low, warning growl vibrated in his chest, a sound so deep, so raw, it echoed through the quiet yard like a primal alarm. Daniel froze. Max never growled without reason. Daniel followed the dog's stare and found Officer Jenkins standing 10 feet away. Jenkins, tall and rigid, with his hands clasped behind his back, stared at Max with a strange tightness around his jaw. Ramirez stepped closer. "What's wrong with your dog, Hale?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. "Max isn't wrong," Daniel finally said. "He senses something." Jenkins shifted, clearly uncomfortable. Max's growl deepened. Ramirez watched him with narrowed eyes. "That's not normal," he muttered. An eerie silence settled over the yard. For the first time that morning, Daniel sensed a crack in the story he had lived with for 7 long years. A crack he never thought could exist. Later that afternoon, Daniel was escorted to a small interview room. Max was allowed to stay, lying at Daniel's feet, eyes fixed on the door like a guardian. The warden stood at the table. Ramirez leaned against the wall, and Jenkins, tense and pale, stood with arms locked behind him. The air felt sharp. The warden adjusted his glasses. "Jenkins, Officer Ramirez brought something troubling to my attention." Jenkins cleared his throat. "Sir, why didn't you disclose that you were present the night of Daniel Hale's arrest?" Jenkins's jaw flexed. "I was off duty," he said, "walking near the scene. Didn't think it mattered." Max's growl erupted instantly, a sharp, furious bark that reverberated off the walls. The sound made Jenkins flinch. The warden looked from Jenkins to the dog, then back. "Daniel," Ramirez said slowly, "your dog reacted to Jenkins the same way in the yard. And something else. A civilian witness came forward this morning. They remembered someone leaving the victim's house that night. Someone matching Jenkins' description. Jenkins there." End quote. Jenkins stiffened. That witness is mistaken, but the room already felt tilted, shifting, changing shape. The warden's voice darkened. "We're reopening this case, effective immediately." Daniel inhaled sharply. For the first time since his conviction, the air didn't feel suffocating. It felt possible. Over the next days, the once-forgotten case of Daniel Hale ignited like wildfire within the prison walls and beyond. Files were pulled, timelines rechecked, old evidence scrutinized with fresh eyes, and the more investigators dug, the stranger things became. Fingerprint smudges once dismissed as inconclusive were re-examined using updated methods. They belonged not to Daniel, but to Jenkins. Telephone records showed Jenkins's phone pinged near the crime scene. He had no explanation for it. Uniform logs revealed suspicious gaps in his reporting on the night of the murder, gaps no one had ever questioned, not until Max growled. New witnesses, emboldened by the reopening of the case, came forward. One reported seeing a man matching Jenkins's build fleeing the area shortly after the victim's estimated time of death. Another mentioned Jenkins having a heated argument with the shopkeeper over a personal debt weeks before the incident. Piece by piece, the puzzle shifted, and everything Daniel had endured began to make a terrible, heartbreaking sense. Weeks passed. The deeper the investigation went, the more undeniable the truth became. Jenkins had framed Daniel. He had been at the crime scene. He had planted evidence. He had manipulated the narrative. He had allowed an innocent man to be condemned. It wasn't just negligence, it was a deliberate cover-up. When confronted with the mounting evidence, Jenkins finally cracked. The fear he had hidden for years surfaced, unraveling in panic and denial. But the truth had already risen. The prosecution dropped all charges against Daniel Hale. The order for execution was nullified. And after 7 lost years, the gates of Ironwood State Penitentiary opened not to swallow him whole, but to set him free. Daniel stepped out of the prison with trembling hands. Sunlight touched his face. Real sunlight, not the diluted glare that seeped into the yard. He blinked against it, overwhelmed, and there, waiting just beyond the final gate, was Max, tail wagging, eyes bright, a soft whine escaping his throat as he bounded toward Daniel without hesitation. Daniel dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around Max, burying his face into the familiar fur. "We made it, boy," he whispered. "We made it." Max pressed his head into Daniel's chest, as if confirming, "Yes, we did." Together. The two walked forward. No cuffs, no guards, no prison walls, only open sky. Freedom tasted different than Daniel expected. He wasn't the same man who entered that prison 7 years earlier. He carried the weight of lost time, broken trust, and the lingering shadows of accusation. But he also carried something stronger: loyalty. Max's unwavering devotion had pierced through a truth buried beneath years of silence. Slowly, Daniel rebuilt his life. He moved to a small town outside Cedar Creek, where a nonprofit organization helped him find work as a carpenter again. Max became a local favorite, often seen sitting by Daniel's workshop, watching the street as though guarding his newly reclaimed world. Neighbors learned Daniel's story. Some offered sympathy. Others offered respect. But Max offered something no human could. A reminder that love doesn't need words. That truth sometimes rises from places no one expects. That innocence can survive even the deepest injustice. In the end, it wasn't a detective, a lawyer, or a courtroom that saved Daniel Hale. It was a dog. A dog who remembered. A dog who sensed something no one else did. A dog who refused to let the truth remain buried. This is more than a story of crime and justice. It's a story about loyalty, about second chances, about the silent bond between a man and the only being who never gave up on him. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or kept you on the edge of your seat, please like this video, comment your thoughts below, and hit the subscribe button. Because here on Epic Storybox, your next journey begins with the stories that deserve to be told. Thank you for watching.